You are listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope, the podcast. I'm your host, Jana, and today I'm here with a real special guest, Rachel Freeman. Rachel's a special education teacher by profession, advocating and giving a voice to those who have trouble finding their own. She is a poet, creator and lover of life. Rachel believes everything happens for a reason. So do I, girl. You're in good company. Everything, big or small, teaches her a lesson and provides room for self-reflection and growth. Rachel believes in the interconnectedness of all beings and life on the planet. She would like to continue telling her story and helping as many people as possible. Her dream would be to republish her book and make her story into a miniseries for a streaming platform, and to work with the university women's centers, inclusion organizations, and continuing to help people understand and overcome negative body image and disorder eating. I love everything you're talking about, and I'm so glad that you're here. And she really had to do a lot to be here today. So thank you so much for being with us today, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
One of the first things we do with all of our guest speakers is to ask them to share a story of hope, because I honestly believe, like you said, our journeys, no matter how horrible they may seem at the time, are given to us for a reason. And when we look back, we're like, I get it. So I love that we share stories of hope. So whoever is like maybe in that dark part of their journey or in a dark part of their season, they see that there's hope and there's something beautiful coming. So do you want to share your story with us today?
I would love to. So it's really interesting that I'm having this interview on Yom Kippur. And for those who don't know what Yom Kippur is, it is the Day of Atonement for the Jewish people. So I struggled with the idea of actually coming and giving my interview and telling my story. And then I realized being on this podcast is actually my story. And by sharing what I have gone through and what I continue to go through and struggle with because I'm a human being, part of my atonement is letting it go to let others know that they're not alone in their journey. And so usually people on Yom Kippur, they fast. And I am a recovered anorexic and exercise bulimic. And because of that, I do not fast. And part of my fast is actually to share instead of withhold. And so I want to share my story and my story of hope with all the listeners, because I think it's so important to remember that we are not alone. And what works for some people doesn't have to work for everybody. And I have found my spirituality through my recovery process. I would go to sleep after not eating for days and would have heart palpitations and would hope to wake up in the morning, but was in such a weird mind headspace that I didn't really know what that meant. And then as I started going through recovery and talking to people and understanding nothing was wrong with me, everything was wrong with what society was telling me about what I was supposed to be. And that helped me understand and come to the place where I am now as a special education teacher and working with kids, especially younger kids, to help them understand that they have a voice and they matter just as much as an adult. And so I think that's just my precept of living, is that it's not just about me and my story and what I've gone through. It's about me being part of other people's stories and letting them know and understand that there are other people who have had similar experiences. I hate limiting people and their own experience because mine is unique to me and my journey. But I do know that there are parts of my journey and my experience that other people can relate to. And that's why I thought it was so important to be on a show like this.
I think it's super important to be on a show like this too, because it's been my experience when I talk to people who are struggling or recovering from eating disorders. It's like an ugly little secret they don't want to talk about. And when they don't talk about it, it doesn't ever open that up for healing for others, right? Like people become aware of, it's not just me. like other people are going through this, and look at them, they're coming out on the other side. They found that path out. And so it opens the doors for them to be able to ask for help and start talking about it. So I'm so glad that you are putting a voice to this. I want to know why you named your website and your whole program and everything you're doing Little Girl Big Appetite. Is that what it is? Appetite?
Yeah. So it's one of the handles that I have on Instagram is Little Girl Big App. And now, having gone through COVID and re-emerging myself and being part of a new, I would say, group of people who have helped me as COVID it was a hard time for a lot of people. I did check myself into an intensive outpatient facility, and I would do group twice a week. And so then it made me realize that this Little Girl Big app was actually feeding more into the eating disorder and the body image that I had of myself. And so I'm kind of in the process of trying to figure out and rebrand it. But Little Girl Big App and Little Girl Big Words. I also have a book called The Hunger, and it's all the poetry from my recovery 10 years ago. A little over 10 years ago, when I was going through recovery, I chronicled my entire eating disorder recovery through poetry. And then I created another handle for Instagram where it's all my poetry. And then it's kind of morphed into this whole, like, not really focusing on the eating disorder per se, but on life itself. So if something big comes up in my life, I write about it, and I usually put it in poetry form, and then I put it up. So this whole Little Girl Big app, I realized, was more feeding into this persona, I thought. And now, as I'm accepting myself, because I am a 34-year-old woman, I'm not this little girl. I am actually a woman who has a lot to say, who has a lot to contribute to the world. And so I'm in this process of moving away from the little girl part, but I really think it's important because I had struggled and had kept myself in that headspace for so long, and only saw myself as like this little thing because my body image was so tweaked, that I wanted to continue having something for people to go to see that it had actually gone the complete other end of the spectrum, from like when I was restricting to taking pictures of all the food I was eating finally. And I was like, this is so unhealthy. So from time to time, I post on both that and a blog I have of the same name. But as I said, I'm trying to move away from that and embrace who I am and where I am in my process in recovery. And I want everyone to know that it's okay to see yourself one way at one time in your life, and then see yourself in a completely different way at a different time in your life.
So I love that you're saying that you're moving away from that little girl because you're a grown woman. Here's the thing. That's a good thing and a bad thing, because we all have that little girl still inside of us. But as that little girl starts to heal, you don't need that as much, right? And you start to move into your womanhood, even though that little girl's there, but she's healed, right? And all those things are all beautiful that she's going through now. But I love that you recognize that, even though the way you said it was a little bit different. But I think that I still have that little girl in me, and there's still things that she hasn't healed from that stick with me. And the other thing you said that I think is so important for people who have any kind of eating disorder, if it's not eating enough, eating too much, eating and I call it eat and release and letting it go, are just even thinking about it so much you can't stop thinking about, like, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? How much do I eat? It's just so much that people know that on my journey, I had to have my stomach completely removed, which changed the way I worked with food. And so now I don't want to think about it. So if I go somewhere and people are like, you're responsible for lunch and this, and I'm like, I can't. I don't want to think about food. I don't want to prepare the food. When I'm hungry, I go fill my body. Like, I don't want all the things in my head about the food. So I get that. I can't do that either. So I think maybe for your journey, that moving into a new season for you and how that looks, like, this helped you. It was good for you during that season, but now you've grown out of that season and there's something more. So you were absolutely right. It may have worked yesterday and not today. You were one person yesterday and maybe not today. Hopefully we're all different people every day, right? I love that. I want to talk a little bit about your the hunger, and I know it's full of poetry. And I went to her Instagram. By the way, all the links are going to be in the show notes, so you can easily connect with Rachel. But I went to her Instagram page, and on her Instagram page are a lot of beautiful poems, and they're amazing. Like, they are really amazing and empowering. And when I say all the time, journal, 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 get those thoughts on paper, she took it to a whole nother incredible level. She journal, 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 got those thoughts on paper and turned them into art.
It's true. It was, I had always wanted to be a published writer when I was a child because I had so much to say, but didn't feel like I had anybody to really listen or connect with me on the way that I needed. And I think that also kind of fed into my eating disorder because the eating disorder was so secretive. And so what were all the big feelings and thoughts that I was having. So I would write everything down. And then as I was writing all the poetry for the book, I was just like, you know what, this is what needs to be published. This is what needs to be out there. But I wasn't actually ready to put it out there after I had gotten help for my eating disorder. I had actually waited 10 years because I had accepted it and I had known where I was, but I wasn't ready for my family to read it. I wasn't ready for other people outside of my circle to actually know who I truly was and what I was truly feeling because I was still trying to protect them. And then I realized, as you said earlier, it's part of the healing process. And if it affected them in a way that was going to be negative or concerning, or they were going to question something, it had already surpassed my level of understanding. Like I was already past that, and because I was getting help for what I needed. So that at that point was on them and their reaction to my, as you called it, art. But it wasn't really, for me, it wasn't art. It was me just telling my story in words that were on one page and then getting it out there. And so I think that no matter how anybody decides to tell their story or make art, or whenever they're comfortable with themselves enough to share who they are, I really encourage everybody to do that because it does help in the healing process. And then you honestly do start to recognize how much you matter in the grand scheme of things, because then other things in your life start to fall into place differently.
You know, your poetry is really beautiful, and it's real. Like, this is her journey, and like, so she's giving you a part of her soul. And if it's okay with you, can I just read one?
Yeah,
it's a short one, but like I was reading, I'm like, this is so raw. But it says, vulnerable or manic, avoiding the panic. Methods to cope, food is my dope. Validate my relapse, it's part of recovery. Don't emotionally collapse just because I'm hungry. I love that. That's such a real heartbeat from you going out like that. So many people can relate to that right now. By the way, as women, food is our dope. We know that. We eat when we're happy. We eat when we're not happy. We eat when we're sick. Like the first thing you're sick, your mom gives you soup and, Jell-O's, feed it. And so we're feeding all those emotions instead of really processing them. And you are like, you just put that out there.
Yeah. And I've never actually thought about feeding the emotions. And that's something on a completely different level of those who don't recognize that they have disordered eating patterns. Like, you are legitimately feeding something that is just a manifestation of what you're dealing with. And I had a hard time at first because part of my journey was losing my best friend to heroin. And she's a huge inspiration. When I say losing, we stopped being friends and now she's sober and things are great. But she was like a mirror to everything in my childhood and even into my adolescence. And then when I saw her super high and this emaciated body, my disordered eating and my eating disorder brain was like, you need to have the body like the junkie. And so it would trigger me even more. And it's just so interesting that having gone through mini 12-step programs I did OA, which is Overeaters Anonymous, which happens at the time they were only housing restrictive eating and overeating together. Now they have separate meetings, which is very nice. But with my best friend, I was going to different like AA, CA, NA, MA, like all the meetings. And when I would say that I was a food addict, they wouldn't look at me the same. And they would be like, oh, that's not a real addiction. And it was so interesting to me because a lot of the times, especially with food addiction, it's co-occurring with another addiction. And there's this like, not only this stigma, it's another type of stigma with food addiction, but it's this lack of understanding that we're still part of the same connected fabric when it comes to healing and just wanting to be better for ourselves and for the world around us. And this acceptance, this common underlying acceptance that we're all struggling with something and it just manifests itself differently.
By the way, that was beautifully said, and 100% I agree with that. I think that we do tell people who are coming forward and giving us a voice and saying, I have a problem with overeating, and saying, so do I, right? Just laughing it off. And when someone's telling you that, they're literally, that's kind of their voice of help. Like, how do I control this? I feel out of control. And it does usually, all people who have an addiction, it's not just the one thing. They have an addictive personality. So they are overworkers at the same time, or they're like chain smokers, or like they start cutting. They do all kinds of other things obsessively because they have an obsessive personality and they can't get out of that loop. So for instance, my dad was an alcoholic and he got sober when my daughter was born. So he was sober 20 years before he passed, but he became a workaholic. Like everything was about work, work, work. Oh, and his 12 steps, which I'm super excited about that because it kept him sober, but he had to be at every meeting and be at every event and be a huge part of that. And everything he got into, he immersed himself in 100%. So do you find that now that you are moving into another part of your journey, that you are still carrying that addictive behavior into other behaviors?
Yes and no. I'm very aware of it. When it comes to working, this is such a hard question for me to answer because I'm very driven. So finding this balance between following my passion, working for a living, and like inserting myself into situations I'm not saying that I wasn't invited to or wasn't part of at the onset. I think just being an advocate, maybe I'm addicted to the advocacy role. I don't know, but I love connecting with people. And if I hear or see something that I think is either not right, or I see somebody struggling in a way that I used to struggle, I step up. And so I don't know if that would be considered part of like the addictive personality, but I do also notice that in a way of like, I've never been one to go out and party because I always knew that if I drank a lot, it would lead me to eat more, which then would lead me to be even more sad, which then I would restrict or I would over-exercise the next day. And it was just a cycle. So I recognize the cyclical nature of where I am in my life in specific instances. And although I'm in a different place in my life, there are still other stressors and life itself that make me more aware during certain times that I just need to be more cautious and connected to my being, or I know that it could be a slippery slope.
So I don't want to put out any names here, but I know somebody who's very near and dear to me that is struggling with an eating disorder that they haven't recognized yet. They're very young. And what would you say to young women out there who are going through this part of a journey right now? What would you say to them? Like if you were giving them a moment of wisdom, what would you have said to your younger self that was going through this now that you're like, by the way, you're never in a perfect state and you're never completely well. You're on a journey of wellness, and you're on the journey to like just be the best person you can be. If we ever get there, there's a problem. like what happens? Like we'll never get there. So I want people to understand that you're never going to achieve perfection. You're never going to achieve all those, like be the best person, right? You can always strive to be better every day, but you cannot get to those places because they don't exist. Mm-hmm. So what would you tell your younger self, or young women right now that are struggling with this issue?
First and foremost, I want young women to understand that it's okay to not be okay. And living in a society where there's filters, that those filters exist so other people have a image of you that has either been created by you or those who follow you to make them think that you're a certain way. And then you begin to buy into that narrative. And I also want to say it's easier said than done. So there's so many things that I could say to my younger self, but as my younger self, I know how stubborn I was. I know what was in my head. I know what was being fed to me, like literally fed to me, and what society was telling me, what my parents were telling me. I was also doing commercials and modeling when I was a kid. So like, I know everything that was being told or given to me in a way, and how I internalized it. But as a younger person, I think that they need to understand that their feelings are valid and how they feel is valid. And no matter how hard it is to share that secret that they have, that they're keeping because that's what they feel like they're in control of, that's the one thing that is the most out of control in their life, because that's what starts to control them. And while it is extremely difficult, and I know this firsthand because I started restricting or dieting or being part of the diet culture when I was about 11, you have to trust and believe that there's at least one person in your life that you can confide in. And no matter how hard, if you have that trust and that bond with somebody, they will be there to hear everything you have to say. Whether or not you believe it yourself, you need to tell somebody, because that somebody you tell that you believe is your confidant is your confidant. And when you keep holding that in, all you're doing is feeding your eating disorder, because you are telling yourself over and over again that you're not enough, no one's going to care, and then you're just going to either keep restricting or keep overeating or binging and purging. Like you are literally feeding the beast and feeding the disorder if you are not sharing it with somebody else.
It must have felt amazing when you first were able to share it too, like you weren't alone, you got it off your shoulders. It was out in the world and it wasn't as scary as you thought it was going to be when you put it out there. So I love that would be what you would tell yourself.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. I actually came out, it was very obvious because I had lost a ton of weight, and my physical being had definitely shown what I was going through internally. And that's the other thing with eating disorders. You can't actually tell how much somebody is struggling just looking at them on the outside, because everyone's metabolism is different. Everyone's genetics are different. And just because somebody does one thing or does something else, their body might just be different because that's how they were born and that's how they are in the world. And so having an eating disorder can also be very confusing to the person who is housing the disorder and those who are seeing the disorder. And I think that it's important to remember that. But I had come out actually right after, literally like a day after Brittany Murphy had passed. And it was challenging for me because I had watched her career since I was a child, and there was just conflicting ideas about how she passed. And it was because of that was the catalyst to make me come out and tell my parents, like, I need help. And it was scary for everybody. So when I watch any movie with her, I like, part of me, like, I'm forever grateful to her, not necessarily like I believe there's a silver lining in everything, and her story helped me get my story out.
I love that. You know, she didn't live very far from us, and I saw her quite frequently, and she was all over the wellness journey per se, but she was a beautiful soul. And I think that she would be listening right now, because she had the biggest heart, always wanted to serve others. And so I know she'd be looking down, smiling, saying it wasn't for nothing, right? If I helped one person, that was my purpose. So I love that you said that. Can you tell us where people can connect with you, get your book? We're going to put all the links in here, but I always like to verbally invite them in.
Mm-hmm. So, as I said earlier, Little Girl Big app and Little Girl Big Words are on Instagram. Lil, L-I-L, girl, G-R-L, big, B-I-G, app, A-P-P, or words, W-R-D-S. Those are on Instagram. I also have a personal Instagram that is private, but if you DM me and let me know that you heard me on the podcast, I would love to add you. It's One Love 128, and you can get my book on Amazon. It's called The Hunger, naturally, and again, it's on Amazon.
Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you had to rearrange your schedule, and you waited a really long time. So thank you so much. This has been so empowering. And I hope to all the women listening, no matter what age range you're in, that the one thing you learn from this is to go find that person and share what's going on with you, because you don't have to do this alone. So thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.